I was thinking of a title, An Education System Flourishing. And quite explicitly, this is all of our experiments, not all of our many experiments that I think are worth noting and unlocking human potential at scale. So that's kind of what we're looking at City as a School. A little bit about me, founder of City as a School, also co-founder of an AI startup called Chip, which is the easiest way to build AI assistants. I'll get into what City as a School does in a second. Also an associate at Wild Learning Sciences, where we build psychometric assessment for assessing learner agency and a coaching methodology to support learner agency. Previously done some work in EdTech and also worked on AI alignment stuff, but really going through this wiggly career of mine are three guiding questions. What is a human? What enables its flourishing? How will I raise my future kids? So that's my sort of personal motivation throughout all of these different projects. At a high level, I'm going to share some context, set this up, how I think about flourishing, what is City as a School, go over some experiments that we've been running, hopefully just get the juices going, and then go into a QA about what we're learning and what that might mean for your organization and how you could take that forwards or learn from it. So the context, the world is changing really quick, and the one size fits all funnel is not fit for purpose. Schools and universities can't adapt. Many of them are becoming irrelevant. Many kids are leaving. I would say that we're in an education crisis where we are not preparing people for that rapidly changing world. The capabilities we're developing don't meet the speed at which things are changing. This is the high level context we're operating in. So our mission is really to create the infrastructure for a learner-centered education system that enables young people to flourish in that rapidly changing world. And some more insight into how this thinking goes, inspired by a lot of the work by Donella Meadows. One thing we zoom in on is the rules and rewards of the system. So the incentives, and if you're familiar with trying to maximize grades, then you'll know about incentives and rewards. But we've seen this as like one area we'd like to focus on. It was the start of my work is looking at metrics and assessments and how we could change the rewards around that. That's only leverage point 4 by Donella Meadows' assessment. And I wonder how we could get down to the higher leverage point, which is the mindset or paradigm out of which that system is born. So again, more context setting. There's a mindset shift happening. I hear this a lot with educators. They're saying different things. And I think the crux of this is really some kind of old view of looking at what human nature was. If education is basically philosophy developmentalized, that philosophy was probably something closer to like humans are rational, utility maximizing agents, minds are buckets to fill with knowledge. You have to crush the will of the child to be disciplined against original sin if you come from a more religious context. These are kind of old assumptions of human nature. We need new paradigms, we need new assumptions of human nature. And I think that crux of that is that humans are inherently creative beings. And if we're going to do Sir Ken Robinson's talk, his work, justice, we need to acknowledge that humans build skyscrapers, we build rocket ships, we build infrastructure. This is not what the hummingbird or the butterfly does. And this is what actually makes us uniquely different, is that we're all inherently creative. And so I think education should be oriented around this inherent creative nature of humans. So we need some rewards and rules which reflect that mindset of what we believe humans are. I poked at something that it could be. It's probably much deeper and richer than that. So what are those rules and rewards? We'll get into that, but you can imagine new metrics that are important: vocational metrics, learning metrics, community, civic engagement metrics, equity, well-being and mental health metrics, and even the opportunities for the providers, the teachers, the coaches in these education systems. So we need to figure out a new set of rules and rewards for this new paradigm. At the heart of all of this is a through line. I don't believe that there's human flourishing unless humans have agency. So the work from Ruth Crick and Guy Claxton around learning power is really a lot of the basis of my thinking on this. It guides a lot of the design at City as a School. And at a high level, learning power has been turned into a psychometric assessment, 50 questions that gives you this spider diagram. That spider diagram goes into a coaching conversation. It allows coaches and students, or teachers and students, to have a shared language for like how to improve their sense of agency. A small depressed diagram, spider diagram, is a low agency person in a given context. A fleshed out spider diagram means this person is really knowing what to do when they don't know what to do. They're able to navigate complexity and move forwards. So that's really what this is all about. And in there is the key for enabling flourishing. Without that, I think well-being metrics, happiness will also fade. Okay, so what is City as a School? Why is agency important to us? We're a learning ecosystem. We build learning ecosystems. That's a really geeky way of saying that we build a couple things, and we'll get into that. We're serving people who are underserved by the one-size-fits-all model, so minority groups, disengaged, at-risk learners, and neurodivergent and gifted students. When we interview these people, these young people, we find that 98% of them want to learn about things that are relevant to their interests and career aspirations. They think they're wasting time on theoretic content. They're stressed out cramming for exams, and they don't think that what they're doing in school will guarantee a successful future. Many of them are just leaving. So this is who we work with. They say things like, I want to meet friends with similar passions and interests. How do I build a portfolio that unlocks opportunities? I just want to make money. I want to learn about stuff that I'm interested in. How can I find inspiring mentors? These are the kinds of phrases that come up a lot. And so we looked around for inspiration. We went through the literature. Would anyone like to, I'm going to pick someone out of the crowd to read this if no one comes forward, but this is some inspiration for what we're building. Would anyone like to volunteer? Matthew?
Down the list, Susan and Matthew, maybe not. So the current epoch of world system transition requires that we replace outdated systems of schools with networks of decentralized education hubs that are technology intensive and staffed with citizen teacher scientists. Responding to an unprecedented crisis of human capability requires building an unprecedented educational infrastructure consisting of multifunction public facilities. Each unique local facility combines a library, museum, computer centre, community hub, childcare cooperative, and co-working space, all in one building.
Thank you. Well read. Yeah. This is Zach Stein, Education and Time Between Worlds. So we built Airbnb for Learning. This is the core of City as a School, is that way of stringing together this decentralized learning campus. Museums, business hubs, libraries, makerspaces, all on one platform. And the second piece of enabling this flourishing future, another volunteer, please. Manjvi.
Hi, Serj. Yeah, sure,
Hi.
I can. Yeah.
Thanks.
Over the next century, scholars and fans aided by computational algorithms will knit together the books of the world into a single network literature. A reader will be able to generate a social graph of an idea, or a timeline of a concept, or a networked map of an influence for any notion in the library. We'll come to understand that no work, no idea stands truly alone, but that all good, true, and beautiful things and networks, ecosystem of intertwined paths, related entities, and similar work.
Thank you. Beautiful. Yeah. So Kevin Kelly, editor of Wired magazine, someone who looks at the future a lot. And this has inspired us to build an AI GPS for learning. So these are AI co-pilots that help you make sense of all the options that are available to you and stack them into a pathway to get you to the goal that you need. Cool. We also do other things, some consulting and capability enhancement. And these are the bets that we have, that coaching in AI will start to overtake teaching as the way that young people thrive. Portfolios unlock opportunities. AI will do most digital work and humans will guide the what. They'll care less about the how, and humans also need to know why they're doing the thing. We also see a trend that unused real estate is becoming learning hubs. We also see the trend that we're betting on, that all of this infrastructure can become publicly funded across new success metrics and not be a private deal. And then change is coming from the bottom up with leverage. And you see this with the ubiquitous access to AI tools now. Teachers can build their own AI tools, students can use their own AI tools, and just other technologies. So with our partners, we've been doing some great experiments. We'll try to zoom in on a couple that I think are really fun. This experiment was really around this idea of the habits of high agency learning combined with AI to create a new culture of learning. So where's this coming from? So Justin Reich, writer of Failure to Disrupt, MIT Scratch team, trying to bring technology into schools for many, many years, noted in his book that we don't need new technology. These new technologies, often designed to lead towards these new goals, is often domesticated by the goals and current practices of the old culture. What's needed in education is not new tech, but new culture. So what is that culture? And this is our question going into this experiment. We know that learning power is at the core of it. We know that we want to bring agency into the center of this new culture. So this is already giving us a shared language between everybody in a learning center about how to support a learner, and the coaches and the adults know what they're doing. But culture is kind of a vague term. I wanted to get this into something concrete. What is the most atomic unit of culture? I think it's a habit. So here's some example habits of high agency learning: asking people about what inspires them, which objects and places, and why they're inspired by them, building webs of learning relations around people, removing blockers and asking, what do you need to get you to where you're going? Setting goals, don't know where you're going, clarify and set goals with your learners, be their accountability, seek high quality information sources, help run events, clubs, meetups, and classes. And number 10, something like explain systems with people, draw mental models with friends. These are habits that high agency learners have based on our work with learner agency and learning power. And I believe if you teach adults to do this the hypothesis was if you teach adults to do this in learning spaces, young people will see that as role modeled and become high agency themselves. And so we started running these one-day learning centers, various different locations around England, Bali, South Africa, And we had some cool features that we drew out from here that teachers need to come alongside their students, define learning goals and regulate their emotions with them. We were doing something very similar to Kunskapsskolan in Sweden, where there's 50% mastery-based learning and of modules for the national curriculum, 50% interest-based learning of project time. So we found that that was a feature that was reoccurring that could actually be imported into the old system and was also more exciting for students as they think about, I want passion-based, but I also want to get into university. So you can balance that with something like that. And then we were noticing that we were using AI co-pilots to deliver just-in-time support because teachers can't know everything based on the interest of that learner. And we were doing this in co-working spaces with adults trained in these habits. Awesome project. What came out of that actually was a lot of requests for how do I build a portfolio? How do I think about building a career? How do I work on stuff that I'm interested in? And we came up with this 6-step process called the permissionless apprenticeship, or build your own apprenticeship, which is basically to dream team, find 10 people or teams you want to work with, find 3 problems, and then pick one problem to solve, build it in that location with the adults, create a portfolio write-up about it, and then share it with that decision maker at that company, at that community center, wherever you saw the problem. And then you can get accepted or rejected. Sometimes this gets young people jobs. If not, then they're building a portfolio that demonstrates their skills. So it's a really simple way that we've now had 300 downloads of this process, which you can click into each of these and it gives you different steps. But a really fun way to build a portfolio in a permissionless way, which is all on the learner. An adult can show them. Cool. Flash through this one, Streams co-learning space. Then we tried to actually think about physical space a lot. We went to a Marks and Spencer's. If you don't know what that is, it's like a 4-story department store in the middle of Bristol. A bunch of partners got together to think about how we could turn this. Spencer's had a 50-year lease on it. How can we reuse this space to be a learning center? I had some awesome architects come in on the project, thinking of cool concepts. There's basically millions of dollars of real estate liabilities. You can actually offset the cost of these companies by going into them and setting up learning centers. I believe that what you saw in the last project should be the culture that's happening inside here. High agency learning, small working groups. This is much more what the environment looks like. This group Streams co-working in Bristol, co-learning in Bristol, wanted to set up a network of these things. So these are slides from our pitch deck. Here's the floor plan. Some walking around, getting excited about it. As you can see, you don't need much. You just need a nice little center, disused space, and turn it into a thriving learning community. So that's a bit on the space, and happy to talk about that in the Q&A and what we learned about taking over disused spaces. Actually, that project ceased because the Marks and Spencer's took the space back, unfortunately. A lot of good setup though, so lots learned. Columbus Learning Ecosystem. Okay, so that was a single co-learning space. How do you do this across the city? So with our partners, Education Reimagined, I look at the US context a lot. Ohio is going through a crazy growth context right now. Over the next 10 years, a bunch of companies, Intel, Google, Facebook, Honda, plan to move industries such as silicon chip manufacturing and car production back to US soil. So you have something like 66% increase in population in just 10 years, 6 million new job roles. How do you build infrastructure for something that's moving that quickly? So the PASS Foundation are a not-for-profit on the ground there. They already have the student access. They build STEM pathways with the industry there. And we come in as a line item with our technology to basically look at that network of learning centers, which the PASS Foundation already have. Then we map it all on Cities of School. We also build virtual online campuses that you can see over here on the bottom left to capture the remote learners who are out in the more rural parts. Use AI pathway generators to create pathways, and then build a portfolio of skills which will give them access to opportunities. This project's still in progress and very at the early stages, with backing from Honda, AWS, and a bunch of the other corporate groups there. So this is very work focused. And I think the insight here is basically that in the US context, if we want to get to the conversation of flourishing, I think the problem to solve is the workforce issue first. This starts to light everyone's eyes up. It's a really deep problem that they have. And then you can start to, when you deliver results there, then you roll the conversation of mental health and wellness, agency, community resilience. All these kinds of conversations become much easier to talk about, I think. So that's the growth there. Final experiment. So there's a handbook which we're working on. Ohio is the first of these learning ecosystems that we're really betting on in the US. And with our partners, Education Reimagined, we want to create a playbook for launching learning ecosystems that is as streamlined as launching a new school. Both are very complex things. Schools are crazy complex. So we need to streamline this process. So so that we can demonstrate 5 thriving learning ecosystems in 5 years. That doesn't mean starting 5 learning ecosystems. That means starting many learning ecosystems and maybe 5 of them working. So we're doing a lot of research and synthesis with other ecosystem leaders, building experiment cards that allow this to be repeatable processes in the same way that you would go and set up a school, just like a step-by-step guide. Doing service design for supporting other leaders and curating a set of shared technology services, because we don't want people rebuilding technology all the time. We want people to just know what the best things are that they can integrate with. And hopefully City as a school can be more of a glue that brings those things together, like credentialing, badging, different types of assessment based on different contexts, access to different support services and provisions, all mediated by one platform. We have 2 minutes until 20 minutes flies by. And maybe I'll just skim through these. This is kind of the high level process that we've got. If you wanted to start one of these in England, Alex and I have talked about this a lot. How would you do that? Well, we need to identify the stakeholders around you. Okay, if you want to turn your school into a learning ecosystem, how would you do this? You would look at all these people in your ecosystem, start by mapping them, do a readiness assessment, see what the context is that you're sat in. There's often like an innovation ecosystem around you, funding, incentives, already existing initiatives that you need to notice, and that allows you to see how ready you are to make a transition to becoming a learning ecosystem rather than an isolated hub. Then you want to identify pilot cohorts. This might be different if you're a school, but we tend to look at marginalized groups, one like 10 to 100 in size, much smaller actually. Marginalized racial minorities, learners with disabilities, schools with low attendance, refugee children, gifted, talented, homeschoolers, these kinds of groups. And then we designed a 30-day results program. This is what we did in Ohio, is we took African-American boys, Latino girls, and gifted, talented students and ran the same 30-day program, designed differently. Then we need to figure out what's important for you to measure in your context. What is it that's going to demonstrate to your funders and your ecosystem that you're delivering results? And it's not just going to be grades, it's a broader set of things. And then we need to come up with a narrative. It helps people envision the journey moving through this learning ecosystem in that context. And so if you see, there's an article I might share at the end called Uma's Journey. And Uma is going through a learning ecosystem in Buenos Aires. And we tried to paint a picture with AI generated graphics, as you can see here, so that funders and partners can see like, oh, this is what this is going to be. Then launch a home base, pick an actual physical location, do what we were showing in experiment 2, where you find a location, disused space, or maybe like an office space, and set up your culture there. And from there, you can start to streamline learning and broadening access to things like around the city as more providers come online. And then you stay in a sort of weekly experiment cadence. You want to make sure that the founder is figuring out like what's working, what's not, reporting back on those experiments, getting support and coaching as you start to go from like a single home base, a physical location, to many partners connected, and your home base being the jumping off point for discovering what is in that learning ecosystem. So I'll hand it over to you guys. I want to wrap with the thought that this is going to take so many shots on goal, but I hope you can start to see how this closes the gap between the rapidly approaching world of change, AI co-pilots, in the middle of a student-teacher relationship, closing the gap on knowledge, closing the gap on passions connected to real-world things, making a learner's interests connect to relevant things in the world, while still factoring in some elements of, you saw with the Swedish model there, factoring elements of traditional education, if that's necessary. Many of the places we work with just care about the vocational stuff. And even just in that little microcosm of a learning center and what we've been learning there, there's still bleed over insights into how your school could operate, how your university could operate. And then when it comes to how do you do this at scale, I hope this has painted a bit of a picture for you to think about how you could start to enable that at a city scale and go from an isolated island to a connected community that allows your students to access communities that they can thrive in, and that they can know that this is where they belong, that they know that this is where their passions meet the real world, and bump up into the real world with their skills. And yeah, thank you for listening. I'll hand over for QA.
Thanks so much, Serj. Yeah, first time I spoke to you, blew my mind out. I quite got over it. So, yeah, I think it's sort of deja vu now. Really cool stuff to listen to. Thank you so much. Yeah, just
happy to jump in on any point of that. Yeah, double click on anything. What's interesting to you guys? Can share more experiments as well.
I'd love to come in here. Thanks, Serj. I really appreciate the presentation, and definitely a big fan of learning ecosystems and how we can bring in communities to work collaboratively around, rethinking education. And I was curious, I had done some work with the Remake Learning folks, so I think that's kind of similar stuff. And one of the things that really surprised me about that work was just sort of all those spillover effects of like new partners coming together, like when a library works with a business, and then,
Right.
like you bring in the students, and then all these like new things are happening. And so I'm curious if you could speak a little bit to like, what are some of the things that you're seeing as a result of these community collaborations?
Yeah, that's so awesome. I'm glad that you have that context, and those folks, the Remake Learning are really awesome. Definitely check out their work. I'll share a link in a minute. But the biggest one I see is just the students light up at the fact that their skills are recognized and seen, that there's somehow like a new context for them to go, oh, I'm valuable. I'm even hireable at 16. I'm even, and I've noticed like students who have YouTube channels will find some partner who's like a media broadcast agency or like a content creation or news and reporting, and then they'll find a job at like 17. They'll say, when you leave school, we want you to come work here. This is just an eyes light up moment for any child, and definitely one worth watching. So that's as a result of these communities bumping into each other. Another one is just, more of these local businesses finding out that there are suddenly like way more folks who are interested in collaborating, and that there's much more of a, on the ground, the community becomes much tighter. So homeschoolers solving problems for local communities has just been magical to watch. The coffee shop will go, hey, like it was so cool, you guys made our posters, like thank you so much. And it starts there, but that's the confidence building in the child, which is just magical to watch, right? I did a small thing for a local business. I started small, and then I just got bigger and better and better, and grades are now suddenly not the most important thing. I think that's the biggest psychological shift I see, is that they realize their importance in the world outside of grades. For the businesses, like on the extreme end, it's like we've got new workforce, right? Like that happens with some of the bigger folks. It's like, oh, this is a talent pipeline in Ohio. That's extremely true. So there's that kind of relationship. But the spillover effects, yeah, God, they're just too many to name, eh? Like those are just some of them that I'm noticing. But community resilience is right up there. Probably decrease crime. Those kinds of things start to come into the picture as you start to think about bridging these institutions and these groups.
Hi, Serj. Hi. So I'm talking from kind of the educational context I work in, and what I see is important to the students and the community I work within here. Now, we're quite a global community. We've got 60 different nationalities on site, so we've got a lot of different cultures already in a melting pot that is really exciting, presents its challenges, but really exciting. And one thing that struck me there is when you said when you're creating this learning ecosystem around your locality, what's quite daunting is that the locality that exists for those 60 students, albeit their education is here, spans far. And when they see who are they going to be valuable to, where are they going to impact, that locality, that map is quite daunting in terms of where it goes. Have you worked with any institutions where, I mean, don't get me wrong, I come from England, I'm aware that Ohio is probably the size of England itself, so that's vast in terms of drawing together an impact on that scale. But have you worked with any ecosystems where you are trying to stretch that locality that is more global, that you are able to connect all these partners, or that they can connect with different institutions so they can be seen elsewhere if they do want to impact kind of more globally, more immediately when they leave kind of that formal learning?
Yeah, no, great question. Two parts of my experience which are helpful here. One is working with migrant workforce in Italy. We white label our technology to become a pipeline tool. It basically draws down from job descriptions, generates quizzes and assessments to see if you're ready for that job. And this idea of interoperability, the ability that what you learned here is relevant somewhere else. So that's one thing I'll just bookmark. And the other one is this working at Galileo, which is now called Kubrio. This was like a global learning ecosystem connecting what we call dojos. These are learning centers just in different countries. So insights off of those two things. Firstly, interoperability is really hard. Badging interoperability is not very good, because what's happened is, you've got Adobe, Photoshop, Google dominating the badging space. Anyone who makes a sort of like a badge is mostly nice to have. Then it's actually like a transportable thing that unlocks something. Only Google badges, only the big tech companies really have good badging that is interoperable, right? So that's one thing I noticed there. Someone who goes through migrants isn't eligible for working in America, but one way we think we could change that is just changes the data source on which we draw down from. So there's a thing called ESCO, which is a framework that the European Union uses for all of the jobs and the essential skills and essential concepts you need to know to get this job. You could change this data source to say like, oh, Lightcast is another company, has global labor market analytics and information, access to tons of jobs, LinkedIn jobs even, right? You could change the data source and change the quizzing so that it's more from the point of assessment, from the start of assessment, that we find out if you're eligible for transfer. It wouldn't be like do the work and then suddenly this is just like a carry across different contexts. You'd have to redo the assessment work based on the changing data source. But that's becoming easier with AI. It's becoming much easier with AI. And then from the Galileo context, working with younger kids. So Galileo was working with 8 to 18-year-olds. And it was incredibly difficult. I think so the different contexts just vary so wildly for the younger groups. I'm not sure how old your learners are, but for the younger groups, it was a nice thing that world schoolers and homeschoolers could jump from Portugal to Japan to Bali or whatever it was that they were doing. But there wasn't much carry across of culture and practice there. It was more like a travel nicety than a robust way of bringing skills across. But the thing to check out here as well is the stuff like Learning Economy Foundation, folks who are like Learning Economy Foundation who are looking at badging. I still think we're a ways out just because hiring practice is the main blocker, really. Like what the employer thinks is important is the blocker, which is why I really like the permissionless apprenticeship approach, because it kind of sidesteps this a little bit. Just deliver value and see if they hire you.
Quickly, have you spoken with anyone or have done any work there with maybe colleagues at the OECD or World Economic Forum who are always looking at these are the skills we're looking for in a global workforce moving forwards? Can they themselves almost cascade down a badging system or some aspect of accreditation that shows that there is a global approach to this? I know that some curriculums do that. The International Baccalaureate is really strong at developing the profile and the learner. Is there any work with some of these organisations themselves that are looking at the global workforce that they themselves can help support this accreditation moving forwards?
Absolutely, yeah. So group like so it started in the US, T3 Innovation Network, and another group who I will share in an email. Essentially, yeah, it's mainly the IEEE standards, about the IEEE, yeah, IEEE, OECD. It's a very long process. I'll be honest, I'm in the working groups and it's going to be years before everyone aligns on how these things are going to be recognized globally, but it's coming. And yeah, just a long process. I don't know what speeds it up there, but it's a lot of comparing like data standard documents against each other for months at a time. But there is alignment happening. A lot of the good stuff that's happening, I find, is happening in the T3 Innovation Network and another group who I'll send to you. Yeah, the conversation's there. Yeah.
Serj, what do you think? We've probably got time for another two questions. What?
Yeah, happy to go overtime as well. Yeah, I'm loving this.
Cool. What do you think? If we're envisaging the sort of future of education that's that you've talked us through here and becoming much more ecosystemic and much more fluid and thinking very differently, what do we have to let go of from what we're currently doing? What do we have to allow to decay to allow the new to grow?
This is a great question. I'll try and highlight it with a story. So when kids leave traditional education and become homeschoolers, they often don't really know what to do with themselves. They'll sit around and they will, go to the mall for a couple of weeks, play a bunch of video games. But at some point, they get really bored and they realize, God, what am I going to do with my time? What am I interested in? Who am I? I think kids' lives right now are so overscheduled. They have no time to think about what it is that they're actually doing, why they're doing it. I don't even think the teachers know like why they're doing it. Everyone's overscheduled. So at some intersection between the grades that we're trying to move towards and the scheduling level of how much we decide we're doing them and when we're doing them is an opportunity for us to think about this transition, which I see a lot, which is kids leaving school and going to homeschooling. How are we giving kids time to do that? Is that a reflective process with an adult? Is that just like less school? Is that a 4-day work week? Is that a extracurricular activity? But whatever's happening there in the process of being bored and leaving school and going and playing video games and going to the mall with your friends for 3 weeks, and the ignition of a learner's will to learn, their love for learning, like a drive to passion, is what I think moves us towards this. There are a bunch of blockers to that, which I'm trying to highlight. But however you could ignite that within your context still, I believe, if done right. So it's really that ability to create space for the identity to change, the identity of the learner to, percolate, wiggle around a bit, be reflected by a competent adult, and go like, oh, man, I'm the kind of person who really loves guitar. I think music is important to me. Music's important to me. Okay, well, I'll study physics. Why should I study physics? Oh, because music is important to me. And this will lead them down a whole new love of learning, which there is no time to reflect on. So some letting go of schedules and the grading, while it's necessary, just maybe less of it, or some creating more space for it somehow. I'll share this model of learning that the Swiss do. 80 schools are doing this model. 50% project-based learning, 50% going through modules of the national curriculum. Beautiful stuff, and spreading more and more around the world. Skap Skålen.
Anyone else got a question for Serj?
Can I jump in with one, actually, Serj? I don't know what's blown my mind more is your presentation, or Lauren's book stacking ability.
Yeah, right.
But
wow.
I know it's pretty impressive, isn't it? More on that on another session. Now, I can see how you're looking for flourishing through a combination of purpose and passion among students. One thing that really interests me is how we're trying to develop a moral flourishing as well, whether there's a way of building that into what you're trying to achieve.
Moral flourishing. I think a lot of moral philosophers are wrong. That's my initial thought. Matthew, disagree with a lot of Aristotle, but maybe a conversation we can have. And moral flourishing. So a lot of the work I did with this group is to do with human values, meaning Alignment Institute. We won an OpenAI grant for making AI aligned with human values, and we have a robust way of measuring human values across populations that we thought wouldn't agree, actually align on some deeper sense of moral alignment than what you think their political leaning is, if they're left or right or whatever. So I think our theory of human meaning and human values is incorrect, and the way we discover it is much more in the moment-to-moment interactions of changing from one social game to the next, and realizing they're coming up against the moral dilemma of like, should I go to a yoga class or drink beer with my friends? And it's in these like reflective moments of God, like I have infinite ways of reasoning that this choice is better than that choice, that we come to uncover our values of like what's more meaningful, what's more important to us. So what we did is we presented a bunch of moral dilemmas to a population of 500 Americans and said, a teenage Christian girl is pregnant, what does she do? And many of their reflective response to this was actually to figure out, say things like they should seek a wise adult wise mentor adult who has some insight for them, or she should spend more time with her mother to figure out like how best to take this opportunity forwards. But what we found is that many of these, we clustered these things together into a moral graph. Let's pull that up. Meaning alignment into a moral graph, which didn't really factor into the idea of like that this person was left or right. There's an underlying value, basically informed autonomy, which we can get to, and we found that there was much more alignment actually between left and right based on this reflective process of like bumping into moral dilemmas. So I think somewhere in here is basically a theory of moral development, which hasn't been applied to education, but we apply it to AI alignment. And somewhere in there is a way of teachers and adults helping young people reflect on the moment-to-moment interactions and allowing values to shift and change. It's actually those transitions, instead of adopting like what we call sort of virtues, they're actually sort of internalized norms that someone's given us, and we just program ourselves with these internalized norms. So that's kind of how I think about moral development and flourishing, is the ability to be flexible with it all, and for you to be able to reflect in the moment-to-moment interactions with other people around you, so that you can actually have a development of, I thought this was good, I thought beer with friends was good, and then I started going to yoga sessions. And it's that journey of moral development, which I think is missing in schools, because there's no reflection and adults don't know how to help reflect that in some way. But it's that constant refinement, which is going to lead to meaning and fulfillment and flourishing in this person's life. Any of that resonate? Was that like in some way obvious, right? Like
it stimulated a lot of further thought as well, which I don't think we've probably got time to jump into now. But yeah, I've been furiously clicking on all of your links so I don't lose any of them when the presentation ends. So I'll do some catch up.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk as well. Like it's dear to my heart, this gap. Maybe you guys have seen really great theories of moral development. I haven't found them yet.
Serj, thank
Mine
you.
are all Aristotelian, so you wouldn't like them.
I wouldn't like them.
Serj, thanks so much. So yeah, I think we've absolutely loved your input and been so thought provoking and yeah, really, really interesting. And I'm sure we'd love to have you back to discuss other things in due course as well and take the conversation further. Thanks, Matt. Cheers. Thanks so much. But yeah, I think we'll probably just wrap things up. You're more than welcome to stay, or I'm sure you'll need to shoot off as well. But yeah, just a huge thanks from all of us for sharing your insights and all the awesome work that you're doing at City for a School and everywhere else, frankly.
Lovely. Yeah, thank you so much, guys. Really, really awesome questions. These are the things that really excite me. So yeah, thank you for lighting up my day. If you want to find out more, City as a School's there. And I also will send you my email. Feel free to reach out. These are the questions that keep me up at night. And so love to speak to you.